Hey folks, welcome back to Relinquishy TCG, where we talk about all things TCG. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a deep dive look at the D23 exclusive cards that came out last year at the D23 Expo for Lorcana TCG. So this is the preview set, collector set, whatever you want to call it, of 6 cards that Ravensburger released last year at the Expo, which was kind of their coming out party, like, hey, TCG fans, we're here. Hey, Disney fans, we're here. What's up? This game is coming out next year. Check us out. And boy, oh boy, did they do a pretty cool job with these 6 cards that they released. So let's get right into my thoughts on these cards. I wanted to break this out into a couple different categories, so this might be a longer video, so definitely feel free to maybe take a seat while you're watching this, grab a coffee or something, because I might get into some of the weeds and details here. But we're definitely going to be spending a little more time than usual discussing my opinions on these cards, and that's the first thing that's important. Is these are my opinions. There are some things that might be close to facts, like when we talk about print runs, which we do not have 100% confirmed numbers, but we could talk about what we think the print runs are just based on some information we have. So let's get into it then. The first thing I wanted to discuss is the collectability of these cards. What that means is, do I think these cards are collectible? And the answer to that question is yes. They are definitely collectible. And one of the reasons I think they're very collectible is because there were only an estimated about 900 to 1,000 sets. The reason why I'm saying estimated is because each day, which at D23 there were 3 days, they released roughly about 300 sets. And we do not know if there were maybe any sets that were made ahead of time, that were maybe shared with employees or promotional items and stuff like that, right? Samples, whatever. But from what we know, there are about 1,000 sets. I'll say 900 to 1,000 sets. And right out of the gate, when you start to think about TCGs in general, it's very rare to find cards that have that low of a print run when it comes to chase cards. And I'm just going to be comparing this to what we know in terms of the releases that are coming out later this year with Lorcana. And so I think that with Lorcana TCG kind of fully releasing this fall in 2023, you start to think about if the maybe hardest cards to get are maybe 1 out of like 20 to 30 boxes. I'm just making that number up. I have no confirmed numbers or sources or anything on that. And you start to think about how many booster boxes and packs they're going to have out there, different promotional type of items. I think you're easily going to see potential populations of these very high-end chase cards from the first set probably entering easily the couple low thousand range. What I mean by that is I don't think there's going to be a card coming out of the first chapter that is sought after that is going to have less than, let's say, 5,000 copies available worldwide. That means they could be maybe a couple thousand in English and several other thousand in other languages. But in total, I can easily see the lowest and rarest cards for Lorcana, at least for the first set, easily being like 5,000 to 6,000 copies. No problem. I have no doubt they're probably going to be that high. Just based on saying, let's say, there's going to be maybe 1 in every 20 to 30 boxes to get like some of the rarer cards, and just thinking like how many boxes they're probably going to produce and how many people are going to be opening these boxes, and you're going to have various print runs of this probably, and I'm just thinking you're easily going to see that number met. And that comes back to there are only about 1,000 of these cards for the first preview set released. And so when you think about pure numbers, that's going to be significantly rarer than I think any of your chase cards. Now, that's not to say Lorcana isn't going to have chase cards that rival this count or this rarity in the future. I just think when we're thinking in the short term, I think these are going to be the rarest cards to get in terms of pure numbers. Now, in terms of scarcity, I think they are also going to be some of the scarcest cards to buy as well, unless you're willing to pay a high premium, because out of the 1,000 sets, I honestly believe that maybe 20% of them or so are probably consolidated in only a handful of collectors' hands, and those folks are just sitting on them. What I mean by that is you had an event where folks that had D23 tickets went to, they had to line up, wait overnight, whatever, camp, and then they had an opportunity to potentially purchase these, fighting with like thousands of other fans to try to get in line to purchase a couple hundred sets each day, right? I'm not saying one person purchasing a couple hundred, but what I do know is that there are people that brought like friends or family members and stuff, and they got in line, and then they were able to, maybe their group got a couple sets. Some folks were buying sets from other fans that day at the event, so I know that several sets moved hands pretty early on, either at the convention or within the first 1 to 2 weeks on eBay. And I know there are people that have come out and said that they have easily 100 sets. And so when you start to think about the consolidation of how many sets exist and how many sets are probably in only a handful of hands, I think you really got to start thinking these cards are going to become scarce if these quote-unquote whales do not feel the need to sell their sets. Now, if you go on eBay right now, you're going to find sets available, but I think their price range is extremely high. I'm talking like $5,000-$6,000 for one set, like if not more. And there's not a lot of them available, honestly, like for that price range. And then you start to look at like some people have them at like 7,000-8,000. And so, I mean, they could always fluctuate by the time this video comes up. But basically what I'm trying to say is you're going to be either paying a premium for these or you're not getting them, basically, until one of these whales or somebody that has a lot of sets decides to sell, or the game dies and these cards become worthless, which I think is unlikely, but you never know, could happen. So I think you're going to have a hard time purchasing these cards for a reasonable price, and what I think would be a reasonable price is much lower than the $6,000. I mean, I would say like maybe 1,000 to 2,000 is reasonable, but even then, I don't know, like that's a lot of money for people, and I can definitely see why people wouldn't want to invest their money in that. And so I think that if you have a high risk tolerance, what I mean by that is you're not afraid to kind of throw your money into things, and maybe they'll shoot up, maybe they won't, maybe they'll drop, maybe you'll lose 30%, maybe they'll become worthless, I don't know. If you're not afraid to do that, then go ahead, spend the money. But me personally, I'm probably not going to be putting several $1,000s into these cards. At least not anytime soon, mostly because I just think it's extremely expensive. I can't really afford that, and I think it would be a little irresponsible on my finances right now. But if you have the money and you really like these cards, and I will tell you, they look amazing. I've seen them in person. The foiling is great. Like, I think the unique stamp that they have on there, they have a first edition and a D23 stamp. It's entirely possible first edition stamp doesn't come to the first chapter, and that these are the only cards that have first edition. It's entirely possible that the next D23 in a year from now happens and they do more releases, but they decide they want to do maybe 5,000 sets. It's entirely possible, and if they do 5,000 sets, I'll tell you right now, all 5,000 will sell out no matter what next year, just looking at the hype of this game. I think that the momentum of the game, the hype is huge right now. I think that the hype's going to grow even further as into the year as we go, as the holidays approach and the game launches. I think the hype's going to be massive. I think that it will probably stay extremely high for the first year or two. And it's entirely possible that this game could falter out in, say, 4 or 5 years. And so I think you do need to be careful if you are looking to invest in these cards. But in terms of collectability, I think it's great. They got a really cool kind of unique foiling pattern. They have those stamps, like I was saying. They were extremely hard to get. They do have a rarity to them as well, being like 900 to 1,000 count limited edition, and that's not even considering the kind of condition rarity that's applied on top of that. So there might be 1,000 of Maleficents, for example, but maybe really only like 1 to 200 of them are PSA 10 worthy or BGS 10 worthy, right? Or 9.5 worthy. So I think you do have to consider that. It's even higher rarity when you start talking about the condition rarity that's applied to it. And I think scarcity is going to be tough too, because there are a lot of collectors that have these that do not want to sell them. You have a lot of collectors that are heavily invested in them and they want to just sit on them because they have a large amount of money and they don't really mind if they sit on these cards for a long time. What I mean by a long time, I'm talking like several years, right? Which isn't really a long time, but in terms of Lorcana just being a brand new game, that is a long time. And so I guess to kind of come to full circle here, do I think these cards are worth money? Do I think they're going to make you rich? Well, I think if you bought them at the retail price of $50, you're going to be a very happy man or woman right now because you have 50 extra money easily, and I would probably recommend grading them if they're in grade worthy condition, or taking that money and enjoying whatever you want to do with that earnings that you just made. Now, if you're buying these at the $6,000 to $7,000 mark for a set, I would be hoping that you have a very high risk appetite and that you do not mind sitting on these cards for years, because it's potentially possible that they do not move much upward in the next year or two, and it's entirely possible that they drop as well in value. So I think you got to be very careful with that. It's a large sum of money to be investing in a game that hasn't even released yet, but I do think that so far Ravensburger has been hitting a lot of things. What I mean by that is they have great IP, they have a solid fan base, they're doing the marketing right now, they have a lot of kind of preview cards that are coming out that look great. The cards that they did release were really well executed in terms of just like purely how good they looked, and they have that chase factor with the unique stamps and the foiling. So I think that it's entirely possible that these cards could go up, especially as we get closer to release and the hype surrounding the game just grows and we get into the holiday season. It's always possible, but I would be extremely careful, especially if you're looking at spending 5 figures on these cards, or high 4 figures, potentially 5 figures if you're buying like PSA 10s or something. Now, if you did want to invest in these cards, or kind of expose yourself to them a little bit, either as a Lorcana TCG fan or someone that wants to collect Lorcana TCG, or just a TCG, kind of collector type of person that collects different things like IPs and fun card games and stuff like that. I think that if you could find these cards at, let's say, any of the cards in near mint condition raw for maybe like $200, $300, I think that's going to be hard to do. But if you could find them in that condition, I would say, hey, why not? I mean, you look at some of the cards like Umbreon from what's it called, the latest set, or not the latest set, but the set that has all of the different evolutions and their all arts and stuff like that. I'm drawing a complete blank right now, but you know the set I'm talking about. But if you were to get that Moonbreon, then you're spending $600 for that card in raw condition, $1,000 for PSA 9 or 10 graded, right? Like about $1,000 or so for PSA 10, I think, last time I checked. And that card has thousands, and I mean thousands, in terms of population. So obviously Pokemon is a huge IP, but Disney is also a massive IP, and Pokemon has a historical 20 plus years of cards and doing a great job with them as well, and keeping the hype and demand there and being good with the supply as well. And Lorcana is new. They might not be able to match that. They might not even be able to match 10 to 20% of that. But I think that if you're looking to expose yourself to something different, you really like the cards, a couple $100, if you can find a good deal on one of the cards, I would say why not? It's not a bad deal when you start to think about just the numbers. But if you're talking like $1,000 for a raw Elsa, I think you have to really have the appetite for the risk. And if you do have that appetite and you can afford it, and you can afford to lose the money potentially, because you can lose the money, then I think, you know what, why not take the risk, right? But that's very, very few of the people watching this. Probably no one watching this is actually in that category. But if you are, then you don't even need me to tell you to take the risk. You've probably already taken it yourself. Once again, this is not financial advice. I think that as long as you have a good understanding of what you can afford, and you know you're interested in the cards, do what you want with that information. I just mainly wanted to talk about how collectible I think these cards are, and I think for Lorcana TCG, or just TCGs in general, they are going to be collectible because they were the first preview card. They were the first Lorcana cards released with unique foiling patterns, with unique stamping being the first edition stamp, as well as the D23 stamp. And I think that the low number of count of about 900 to 1,000 of each card is going to be pretty big. And just the fact that they're extremely hard for people to get when D23 was here in 2022, right? Like, they were extremely hard for people to get. People were camping out for these. People were fighting for them. People were very, very, adamant on getting these cards and pushing people around and stuff like that. I think that when you take all of those factors into account, I think that these cards are great in terms of collectability, and they're amazing to look at. So if you have a chance to see them, I've seen them at D23 when they had the little display. I did not have a chance to buy them at D23, but I do think they're awesome cards. So that's all I wanted to say, and I will be doing another video on the Mickey promo card that they released at D23 as well, as a free promo item. So feel free to look out for that video, and I'll be talking about my thoughts on that. So once again, I hope you all enjoyed the content. I hope everyone has a great day. Thanks for checking out my videos. Feel free to like and subscribe if you'd like, and I'll catch you all later. All right, peace.